Guest joining us now, his second time on the show. He's a young guy, went to Boston University where he studied environmental analysis and policy. So he's a guy to talk to about the environment from a youthful perspective. He is the creator and host of a podcast called The Sweaty Penguin. So we welcome Ethan Brown back to the show. Thanks for being here, Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk climate change policy because my position is that we shouldn't be arguing about whether it's man-caused or not. We should be arguing about if it's man-caused, what are the things we can do to remove our influence on the environment. And I've yet to see policy that we're pursuing with great vigor that makes a lot of sense to me. So I wanted to go through those with you and see what you have to say. Do you have any problems with any of the policies that we've been pursuing over the last couple of decades?
Of course I do. I think there's been plenty of whiffs and some successes too. And I think largely what it comes down to is right now, like you said, a lot of the discourse has historically been about, is it happening? Should we do anything or should we do nothing? And that means we're not having these productive policy conversations. I think when you bring in people who have a more liberal approach and people who have a more conservative approach, and you can talk and debate and work out what policy does make the most sense that helps the climate and helps the economy and health and justice and security, then we can get to some better answers.
All right, so what are the things, like electric cars are the big out front push that's being made right now, and because of big federal money that's been allocated to force into the marketplace electric cars and money for charging stations and a lot of the infrastructure that's needed to make the transition. And this just looks like a doomed policy to me because we don't know about all the issues like supply chain to be able to build batteries. We don't know how dependable cars will be over the long term. We don't know how much range they'll have. And, you know, normal people want to be able to use a car to go to work for 20 minutes drive each way every day, perhaps, but they also want to be able to take a 1,000-mile trip. And electric cars don't work for that. Why are we doing that? Does that make any sense to you to have the government decide what the transportation solution should be?
I think there's a long conversation with electric cars, and we did a great episode about it on The Sweaty Penguin, but to give as quick an answer as I can, I think you're right. There are a lot of concerns with EVs, from how are we going to generate all the electricity we need to keep them charged, to getting enough charging stations out there, making sure the range is good, making sure batteries can handle cold weather, making sure the mining of the minerals is done sustainably. All of these are issues. There are also issues that can be solved, but we have to do that. So in terms of policies that are creating mandates, I think
you're against mandates?
Well, I think there's certainly pros and cons, but I think there's other options too. You can create market incentives. You can create more technology neutral policies where you just say, hey, we want you to cut your carbon emissions, but whether it be electric or whether it be some other solution, you as automakers can figure that out. Regardless of what that is, I think there are ways to move forward that take into account these issues and give people more freedom.
So your approach would be, say you were given the magic wand to make American policy for how we transition. You say we give people a cap and let them figure out how they're going to meet it on their own?
I'm a journalist, so I try to stay away from making my own policy ideas, but I can say this. Something the EPA did recently that I think was maybe a little, it has its issues too, but maybe a little smarter than just broad mandates, is basically setting caps for how much the average vehicle from an automaker can emit by a certain time. Mm-hmm. So what that means is the automakers can say, we can create electric cars, or we can find ways to make gasoline-powered cars more efficient, or we can come up with a whole new option, maybe hydrogen cars, who knows. So I think, again, anything that can create competition, create freedom for consumers, and importantly, make sure there isn't any economic downside, but in fact economic growth and development, that's where I would lean.
So if we were to think about hybrid cars, we would see that hybrid cars have the ability to do what electric cars do and to also do what gas cars do if necessary. And that gets rid of the problem of range being inadequate for some people's use or a lot of people's use. It also minimizes or mitigates to a large extent the battery issues, because you don't have to you're not going to depend fully on batteries for transportation. And they've been there for 20 years, so we've got a lot of experience with making them and refining the technology. That looks like it has all those problems solved.
Yeah, hybrids are pretty cool, and hybrids, they start with the electric. So if you're just driving to work, you may not even use the gasoline. I think where the advantage of a fully EV as opposed to a hybrid is a regular EV will have way more range than a hybrid, even if you combine the electric and the gasoline. Now we're getting EVs that can go for a few hundred miles. So again, there's pros and cons to everything, and I think ultimately the best thing we can do is let these companies compete to create the best technology and let consumers pick what they want. Everyone's going to have different needs. For myself, I don't envision being stranded in an EV in North Dakota anytime soon, but some people may do those road trips and may need something else. So the more options there are, the better.
How about one of the things that really confounds me about policy with regard to the idea of climate change being an existential threat is that we've been hearing for, 25 years about the existential threat, and we haven't pursued the one form of electricity that is clean and safe and could handle this, and that is nuclear energy. And I don't get why that's not happening. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised. We did a podcast on nuclear energy, too. I interviewed a nuclear engineer at MIT and learned that it is a lot cleaner than it's made out to be, as you alluded to. The amount of nuclear waste that the United States has generated from the inception of nuclear to today would fit inside a single football stadium at about 10 feet deep, I think. So it's an amount we need to find a spot for, but it's certainly doable. It's more the politics of figuring out where to put that. And then at the same time, like, the issue of safety is not nearly as big as it's been made out to be. So,
well, it's changed a lot over the. When the protest movement against them was happening, it was a different technology, but it's advanced a lot.
Yeah, we're a lot better at this than we were at the time of Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island. So, yeah, I think nuclear is a very viable source to include in a clean grid, and it does not emit carbon, and we can handle the waste. We can figure out how to mine uranium sustainably, and it's a great backup source too, because solar and wind are not available at all times of day. So, yeah, I think getting as many solutions as possible. Again, let these energy sources compete on price and on quality, but yeah, nuclear should be in that conversation.
But how do you figure that we've gone all these years of this existential threat, and the people who claim that they're scared that we're going to destroy the planet haven't advanced that conversation at all? As a matter of fact, it's the one thing they refuse to discuss.
I think there's misconceptions about the degree to which waste is an issue, or safety is an issue, or mining is an issue. Again, it is an issue, but it's a solvable issue, similar to what I was saying with EVs. So ultimately, again, that's why we need more people in this conversation, people like yourself that can bring that up, and we can talk about it and figure out how do we get as many sources as possible. Some people do prefer certain sources to others. For me, it's just whatever's going to be best for the climate and the economy and our livelihoods.
Yes, and we haven't made progress in that direction, so I'm looking for a solution. I want to figure out how to do it. And apparently, if government hasn't figured out after 20 or 25 years, however long it's been, that the only place where they can get the electricity they claim to want is from nuclear energy, and that's the one source they refuse to discuss, then it seems like we need somebody else to be having the conversation with, because government isn't behaving with intelligence or in good faith.
I do think this tide is turning a little bit. Today we have about 20% of the U.S. electric grid is renewables, another 20% is nuclear. So that's already 40% down, which I think is a lot more than people realize. And nuclear is, I think, starting to make a comeback. There are 2 new reactors in Georgia that are just coming onto operation, and I know other states are strongly considering, especially the small nuclear reactors that they're starting to build in Europe, doing that over here. So I think there's movement on this, but again, we'll see it to believe it.
All right, we're talking to Ethan Brown. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll continue. He is a writer and a commentator for Young Voices, who's studied environmental analysis and policy, hosts a podcast called The Sweaty Penguin. Quick break, we'll talk more on WTIC.